Now that we have engraved the actual image here, what we need to do is cut an outline of this out of a different kind of wood so we can inset it. So we have to make this hollow. We don't want it filled with black. So click on your image. Again, I'm going to click the ukulele, so I have to click kind of outside here. There it is. Right click, go to Object Properties. You can see that I got my ukulele, so let's try that again. Right click, Object Properties. And I want to get rid of the fill. So right here where it says fill, hit X, and oh my gosh, it disappeared. That's fine. I want to now outline it with a hairline, and it must be a hairline for it to see. Okay? And if it created a boundary on that, we can simply get rid of it. What we have to do to get rid of it is ungroup it. So we're going to click on it, right click, ungroup that, ungroup all. Now, when I click on it, it should only get the square, and I can press delete. There. Now the square is gone. So now the only problem is the eye is separate from the outside, and so is that. That shouldn't matter. All the images are there. Whether they're grouped or not, it'll still cut it. But now that it's a hairline and it's empty, I'm going to cut this on a different piece of wood. So all we have to do now is just simply click on your ukulele, and we need to keep it the same size. That is very important. So now you need to find a piece of veneer that is at least that size, and then I can simply change my size, whether it's 6 by 6, that's fine, or 6 by 8, or whatever you can find. Let's say we can find a piece that's 8 by 8. Okay, and it's okay to move this. I can grab it, and if I want to group it again, we'll just go back and hit group, and now it's all together. And just put this in the middle. The most important thing is not to change its size. So if I do this and do that, that's a big problem. So undo it. Because what I cut out must be exactly the same size as what I just engraved on my ukulele. Now find your veneer and set that up, and then we can print this.
Come over here to the router. This is just to the right of the laser engraver, which is right next to me. Down here in the drawers below the router, I've got a whole bunch of different veneers cut, different colors, different types, a couple different sizes, and they're all rough. They're all about this big. They're not that big, so make sure it'll fit. I have a very light colored wood that I'm engraving into, so I should probably get something fairly dark, and I've been looking around, and this is a nice piece of walnut that I cut that is around the 8 by 8. It's a little smaller than the 8 by 8 I said it could be, but that's okay. As long as it's big enough for the snake to fit all the way in, that's all I need. One of these little backing boards is found under the laser engraver. If you look, there's 3 or 4 or 5 of them under there. All I really need to do is put this, I don't care if it's up in the corner, if you want to keep it there, or somewhere down here, that really won't matter. I just need to tape it down so it won't move, and it's fairly flat. A couple pieces of tape. I know it's hard to see on the video, but it's kind of warped, and that will not help the engraving at all. I'm just going to tape it down so it's as flat as I can make it. A little warping's okay. It's not going to hurt it, but I try to minimize that as best I can. There, all set. Now we're going to take the board, put it back in the laser engraver, and we want it up to this ruler and up against this one. And in this case, we just need to set home to the upper left corner of this piece of wood. It really doesn't matter where it is, but it needs to be the upper left. That's where it always defaults. So let's go through the same process. This button number 8, X, Y, off. Yes, no, you want to hit, or go, stop, I should say. Go, and that releases the arm, so now I can move it over. First, put it over the middle, take the bracket off, flip it over, put it back on those little pins. There's a big gap here, so I need to raise the table, holding the up arrow, get it really close, and then you just tap until it just touches it, and then go ahead and flip it back over. Now I'm going to turn on the pointer, that's button number 9. And you can see the laser show up right there, and I just simply move that to that upper left corner. I can see it right there, and then press button number 7 that says set home, right there. Now I can turn off the pointer. Everything is ready here. I can close the door, and now I need to move what I want to engrave over to the engraver. So I just finished taking care of the snake. So I had my object properties here. I took care of the fill and the outline. So we are ready to print. So there's nothing else to do. I did put in my 8x8, and I found the piece it's a little smaller than the 8x8, but it's still enough to fit the snake image itself. If you're unsure about that, because the upper left corner is my home position, if you're not certain that it's going to fit, just move it closer to these two edges, because this edge and this edge are certain, because that's where I'm putting the laser. Here it could be a hair short, and I still got plenty of room, so that's okay. Now we're going to print. Upper left corner, hit print, go to preferences, and what we're doing is we're vector cutting. Before we did raster, and that's all this area, and I can change the settings. Now we're going to vector cut, and that's down here. Again, make sure that this 8 and 8 match 8x8. Those numbers must match, and it almost always defaults to a different number. So those match fine. Now, I found that these settings, having speed at about 60, and then maxing out, these two are normally a little bit lower. Max that out speed, max that out frequency. Frequency is just how many times the laser shoots in a certain given time. So let's just max that out to give you a best cut. Okay, then hit OK. And print is right there. And now that image has been sent to the laser engraver. One last thing before you hit print, there's a pump right here between the computer and the laser engraver right here on the floor. Make sure to turn that on. Whenever you're vector cutting, that laser stays on, and it tends to make the wood in there, whatever you're cutting, flames, catch on fire. What the pump does is it blows air to basically blow it out as it's cutting. So turn on the pump and then hit go. Now, in full disclosure, when I was done cutting cutting the snake, it didn't actually cut it out. The wood piece for the snake did not just pop out. There was still some left. So, and that's okay. I found that the settings I gave you are good for most of the veneers that I have. Some of them are harder, some are softer. This walnut seemed to be a little on the harder side, or sometimes the laser gets dirty and it doesn't quite have the power that it should. So, all I did, as long as you don't move and shift this board in the laser engraver, if it's sitting in exactly the same spot that it was before, just hit go a second time and it will cut it again, just like it did the first time. And then this popped out just fine. So please keep that in mind. Before you just grab and move, check. You should easily be able to tell if it fell out, if it cut out and fell out. All right, now here's a good example of something else. Mine broke, okay? So the head popped off. Don't worry about that, that's okay. It's just part of the grain. If it fits, it's still gonna be fine. So that'll fit in there and that fits in there. Once I glue it all down, you won't even be able to tell. So I'm actually glad that happened. That's a good example of don't freak out. Let's just continue as if it didn't happen and we'll glue it down. Now, it seems to fit just fine. Everything came out. And again, if you've got tiny little pieces, you may want a pair of tweezers to move things in. Be careful of blowing on it, whether with your breath or with an air hose, so things don't go flying. But keep that in mind. Now, all we have to do, take a bottle of glue, and we're going to glue it on, but I'm going to use my finger and make it really thin. You don't need a lot of glue, just enough to get it to stick. Then we're going to tape it down all the way around. There's another way to do this as well if you want. You can cut a piece of wood and clamp it on, and that works fine too. Be careful, because what you're doing is putting it on a very thin, bendable piece of wood. The harder you clamp it, the more you're going to dent it and things. So both work. In this case, because I want to be more gentle, I'm using tape. So just take a bottle of glue. We'll just put a bit on there like that. And that might be too much, but that's okay. We'll sand it off later. And I don't need to be pretty about it. Just move that glue around, and you just want a nice thin coat, but you really want it everywhere that veneer is going to touch. I may have gotten a little more than I needed, but again, that's all right. A little more on his head right there, okay? And then take the glue off your finger. A wet paper towel would be really handy while you're doing this. Put that in place. Make sure it lines right up with your laser. There it is. You can kind of feel it like a puzzle piece fit in. There, like that. Do the same with the tail part. There it is. Right there. Again, I can kind of feel when it fits into the right place, and that's what I'm doing, like a puzzle piece, just fitting in its own spot right there. Okay. Okay. Now we just take pieces of tape and tape it down. And in this case, you want to tape all of it, not just little parts of it, but the whole thing. Overlap the tape so that it's all taped down nice and tight to your board. And we'll get one more little one there. From here, it's really simple. We're going to let this dry for at least, I'd say just leave it overnight. We want to make sure it's dry because when I put a sander to it, I don't want to rip it off of there. So let it dry overnight, and then we're just going to take an electric and sand it down until it's nice and flat and smooth, and now you have an inlay, nice beautiful inlay.